Well, there were a few blues between the Americans and the Australians. Looking back, you laugh. There was one well, there were two that I was involved in. When I say involved, I was there. One, there were a group of us in Brisbane having a drink in one of the hotels. I forget the name now. And there was an American. We were in a corner, and they were at the bar or something. And I don't know what started. There was some comment made, and one of our blokes took exception to it, a yank. Mind you, they had plenty of money, and we'd spent most of ours on leave, and they were, weren't backward at showing it, particularly the girls, and I suppose we were a little bit sensitive to the fact that they were pinching the girls. Anyway, one of my blokes, they cut it out yank or something, and this big yag said, who are you, Sonny? And Sonny, it was Billy Wilcox actually, I think, said, don't Sonny me, Buster. And so Buster put his shoulders back and said, you want it, do you? Well, I said, no, I don't want anything, but cut it out. Well, then the next thing the punch was thrown, well, it started. Well, there must have been half a dozen of us, and I don't know, might have been 8 of them or some 10 of them. And we were doing all right, and then reinforcement started. Yanks came from everywhere. The word got out, and our blokes came in too. Well, this stage we were pinned against, we were fighting a rear guard action against the wall, and we were getting pummeled a bit, and our blokes burst in. Wow, it was a beauty. The fight spilled out into the street, and they were coming from everywhere. I don't know, there must have been 100 blokes involved at this time. And the next thing, Provost, both the Yankee Provost and our Provost, and everyone turned on them. Eventually, we all started to disappear. They were crying. That was a decent old blow. And there was another one, 2 troop trains. We were on our way up to the Tablelands, and I don't know where the Yanks were going to, but the trains pulled up opposite each other. Well, the comments started. The next thing, both trains had unloaded. There's a fight going on in the middle. Well, it's one of the funniest things you've ever seen. The train drivers had enough brains after a while to pull the whistle and start moving the train. So everyone broke off the fight and went back. But the troop trains were funny up in the Queensland. through a couple of the towns. The railway would go actually through the town. There's a pub alongside the railway station. The train would pull in, and while it refueled or anything, or I'm not sure if we got a meal there or not. But everyone into the pub, of course, and the publicans knew when the troops were coming in, and they'd have all the beer lined up. They'd be all in, and you'd go for your life. So you'd say have 20 minutes, whatever it was, half an hour, well, 20 minutes while they put water in their tank, the engine, all the rest of it. And then the engine driver give a couple of, they'd give a toot on the whistle, and then it'd be in for another. And then if they had any bottles, they'd be borrowing bottles. And then by this stage, there'd be about 3 toots on the train, and then you could hear the wheel, start to slowly go. And out of the pub and come, well, dozens, not a lot, hundreds, charging after the train, and blokes leading out, pull the grog in first, and then pull the troops in, and gradually the train would pull up until the stragglers would be catching the last carriage. That went on every time. God, it was funny. Well, I didn't drink until I joined the army. Didn't drink at all. I'd had the odd beer. Well, I had an odd shandy, but it was the run back to Tobruk that got me going. All this grog being smashed and poured into the ground, and the blokes, we put as much on our platoon truck. As I say, we nearly threw a bloke off to make him walk to put more grog on. And our first hop said, "Come on, Bob, and I said, "No, look, spirits." It was all spirits. I was never a spirit drinker until the last few years, actually, last 4 or 5 years. But and then when I got into beer, well, of course, when we had an issue of beer in Tobruk, it was too precious to give to anyone. Early in the piece, when we were in Palestine, I mentioned that we went to Gaza. Well, while we were there, we had to go to Port Said so to relieve the troops there while they went up the desert. And we were there for about a month, I think. Well, we were stationed on the wharf. We were guarding the wharf. Well, there was a load of Australian beer there, which was for all the troops in the Middle East. I don't know. I think there was something like 5,000 cases of beer. Someone said 10,000, but well, it was a huge amount. The wharf was stacked with Australian beer, and Australians were guarding it. Wow. I didn't go on the patrol that brought it back, but all our platoon, they all staggered back with a case of beer as a sergeant. You wouldn't be involved in those things, not much. They staggered back with a case. Well, we buried it under the sand because we knew there'd be a stick. One bloke was caught. He decided to stop. He got himself in the middle of the great pile, and he was there when the provos arrived, and he's still drinking. See, that was hours later. So W.K. Thompson was whizzed off to the slammer, but we all the platoons, we under the tents, in the sand, buried all this beer, and of course there's a hell of a row. There were inspections. Where's the beer? Thank God no one looked under the tents or around under the sand, because we had beer there for ages. Beautiful. I was allowed to drink it. Yes, oh dear. Yeah, we got a clean skirt. There was no proof that the Australian soldier did it. Actually, the boys threw a couple of the local police into the water. They tried to object, so they just threw them off the pier into the water. It's pretty tough to stop an Australian soldier from his beer. Yeah, well, before Eltham, while we were training, I was acting company sergeant major of the company, and so they couldn't trust anyone with a beer, so I had control of the beer. Well, talk about what's his name with the blood bank. So the, the different platoon sergeants had come with I got 30 blokes, 2 bottles per man. I say, yeah, you got 2 on leave, 3 of them don't drink. Here's 25 bottles. And of course, the 5 bottles would go into my pool. So I had quite a stack of beer there. I was 2 bob a bottle, so, but I did very well. Couldn't, to square off, I'd have to get the sergeants who were responsible up and give them a beer now and again, but oh, that was great. Now, when you're in a forward area, you got the ration. And it varied, of course, in Tobruk. I think we had 2 issues of a couple of bottles in 6 months. But where it was more plentiful, like just before Alamein, yeah, we got an issue of, might have been 1 a night for a while or something. But everyone, because the non-drinkers, they were smart, they'd sell it to their mates. Not to their mates, but to anyone. At Alamein, I think I was about the only one that didn't have a bottle, well, not the blokes, but officers and NCOs. Well, I must admit I had a little bit of scotch in my pack. That was for medicinal purposes only, in case, which was pretty true. We kept it in case if someone got hit, you'd give them a shot of, which is the worst thing to do, of course, but we did it. Yeah, I only ever charged 1 lot in my life, and I was directed to do that like the soldiers. They'd been on the grog, they'd been drinking. This is before Alamein. We're in the line, but in reserve. Technically, we're in action, and 3 of the, I won't say bad boys, but 3 of the tough nuts of the battalion got on the Arrock and got full, and they started to play up and got into a few blokes, and I got direction to the NCO to go and arrest them. Well, you try to arrest 3 tough drunks, and I wasn't very brave. I went up to them, and they started to get stuck into me. Well, if they'd been sober, any one of them could have killed me, but anyway, they retreated to a trench, and we're going to get a Bren gun and fight anyone that came to try and arrest them. So I let them be for a while, and the CO rang up. I said, yeah, they're under arrest, but they're out. I didn't tell them they're out there looking for a Bren gun. Anyway, they got court-martialed, and they got a few months each. In the main, the troops were good. They got drunk on leave, of course they did, but and I suppose if some play up like they do today, you get a few drunks who, in civilian life, now we're only civilians really, but no, they're pretty good in the whole. Well, I know in Tobruk, our platoon, they weren't all killed or wounded, but sickness, whether it be fever or things. Out of the 30 odd that went in, I think there were about 10 came out of the original that went in at Alamein in the 11 days. In the 11 days that went in, 36, I think there were 11 of us came out. And in New Guinea, there was 30 odd, and I think there were about 9 of us finished in New Guinea. So casualties in infantry, mind you, we had reinforcements and things, but casualties in infantry, you know, I'm not only infantry, there are other units, artillery and the rest of it, but I suppose we infantry have got a bit of a secret pride in the fact that you know that they were in it and take the brunt of things. For intensity, casualties, and sheer exhaustion and battle weariness, Alamein, yeah. We went out in carriers after, at the finish, things were very quiet. So we were all Dutch, we went out in carriers, and there was a company of Germans on a hill, and a few shots were fired, and then it was just surrender. So, well, they knew that they were only going to die there, and what, to hold up the whole army. So they just surrendered. I mean, I would have done the same. I mean, if it was a question of a full battle and you being the weak link, you'd fight to the death, but not when 20,000 have knocked off and left 100 to fight another 20,000 coming on. Bravery is very good. And I've heard all these generals telling us we'll fight to the death and we'll fight to the last man, but those blokes aren't there facing an army. Decorations, the official decorations don't really tell the story. I mean, there's one battalion, the 2nd 48th Battalion, whose CO was out to get as many decorations. He wasn't shy about it. He said, I'm going to have the most decorated battalion in the war, which it was. Our CO, well, I must have been disrespectful to a colonel, but he got 2 DSOs. I don't know that he did put all the, well, we think we should have got a lot more decorations, and I mean, we should have too. We should have had a lot more mentioned in dispatches. A lot were put in, but we don't know what happened to them. Well, we had one, as I said, our battalion, we had the 1st Victoria Cross of the war, Jack Edmondson. Well, his action was terrific, but I would say that there'd be a dozen, if not more, similar actions that blokes did, and there's no recognition whatsoever. Osty Mackel, who got an MC at the same time as Edmondson in the same patrol, terrific bloke, Austin. In fact, he's responsible for me being in Melbourne. He recommended me for a job here in Melbourne, for me to come to Melbourne, and I got it. But that would have happened 100 times, you know. So, but they're MCs, and well, we only got only 2, 3 DCMs, I think. Well, we should have got a lot more. That's the Distinguished Conduct Medal. MMs, we got a few, but there were hundreds of similar actions. So I mean, sure, everyone can't be given a medal, but we, as we in the battalion, don't say, oh, he got a DCM, he got an MM, because we know that most of our mates did actions that were worthy of mention or recognition, and it just, well, we were happy. We knew who the good soldiers were, and 90% of blokes. Of course, there were weak soldiers. They're weak. You can't expect 100% perfection. Sure, we had officers who didn't make the grade, but there's no reflection on them. Sure, we've had, face it, your own broadcaster, we have blokes with SIW, self-inflicted wounds. I saw one bloke put his foot up, level the Bren gun at it with a single shot, and the blokes were saying, "Go on, you're not game." Bang, he did it. Out he goes, Snarler, service is no longer required. Look, it's no good hiding facts. These things happen. Not often, uh, but we had a sergeant, won't mention that, original sergeant, went through the whole war in Papua New Guinea. I don't forget, when we cut off at Juvenile, we used to get supplies. We had base troops, or LOBs they called them, left out of battle. They'd be the nucleus of a battalion if you were wiped out. Every battalion left a certain number out. Anyway, he was a sergeant, he used to bring supplies up. Good soldier, never, he just one day said, no, I'm not going. I suppose war had caught up with him. None of us were critical of him. He just jacked up. He said, no, I'm not going. Can't do it anymore. Well, there are two things can happen. You can charge him with desertion in the face of the enemy or cowardice, whatever you like. Refusal to obey an order, yeah, I mean, or as we did, the bloke had given good service, his nerves had just gone. So he just quietly shipped back to Australia. I don't know whether he was discharged or went to a base job somewhere, but he was just quietly moved up. We all knew up there, but we didn't blame him. But so we talk, but this is just human nature. We're all just, can take so much, others can take more. But let's suppose 95% of can cope with it. Yes, we had bomb happies, but you can't blame them sometimes. I mean, you get subjected to a heavy bombardment, for hours. I'll tell you what, well, before Alamein, we're on this point near the sea. We're in rest, but we're within range of the German artillery, and we used to go in swimming. Oh, this is a great spot, and we must have been observed, of course, and it was very rocky sort of outcrop right on the water, and we'd dug our sangers or we'd built up rocks, for protection, and suddenly they opened up the German artillery, and the German artillery was good, deadly accurate, and they opened up, and God Almighty, the shells were hitting the rocks, and just boom. And I heard this yelling. I said, oh God, someone's hit. I was the platoon sergeant. I've got the platoon there. What do you do? And the yelling kept. I knew it was coming wrong. About 10 yards away, the next hole. Took 1, 2, 3 deep breaths, up and down, dived into the hole, and there was 2 blokes, and they had almost a direct hit. And they were yelling, so I said, stop that, stop it, and then I went crooked them because I had to dive out. Anyway, we all ended up all right, but I didn't blame them. I mean, direct hit, almost a direct hit, must have been just, and of course, they were down below the surface, but it frightened the hell out of anyone. We've been critical of officers, and so the senior officers have been aware of I spoke to one Anzac Day. I spoke to John Broadbent, who was our commanding officer in New Guinea. I said to him, John, so and so, why was he kept on? Because we all knew that he wasn't up to it. He said, yes. He said, I spoke to the brigadier about it. He said, of course we all knew. He wasn't up to it. But the brigadier said, well, look, that's your responsibility. You've got to train him. I said, but how the hell do you teach a bloke to be brave? Anyway, the bloke. I'm not saying that, I mean, but you had to, it's human nature. Some blokes got their commissions through, don't know how, some of them got them through influence. Well, I felt sorry for them, a lot of them in a lot of ways. They came to battle-hardened troops, sergeants or sergeant majors who'd commanded the troops in action, and these fellows come from reinforcement camps, through reinforcement camps, hadn't had any action, and they had to take control. Now, if they were good, they'd succeed. But if there's any weakness, they had a hard job. They had a hard job. And we got some very good ones. We got a few that didn't make it. I think the British officers just couldn't understand it. I'm certain they couldn't. Because they treated their blokes entirely differently. And their senior officers, their generals and things, thought we were just rabble. Oh, yeah. In Tobruk, we had terrific contact with the troops, the Northumberland Fusiliers and the Royal Horse Artillery. We had the greatest respect for them and admiration. Yeah, they were terrific. And their officers were good too. But we didn't, at our level, we didn't have a lot to do with, it had nothing to do with the higher brass. I think it was the higher echelon that were anti-Australian. We didn't have much to do with the Alamein, apart from their artillery, which, well, you don't see the artillery once you're in action. You only see their shells and their drop shorts. They're not too popular then. When you're moving, you're moving at a certain speed, say 100 yards in 2 minutes, and you're leading on the barrage, and they advance, and you advance with it. Well, if they don't keep strictly to the timetable, you're in trouble. Or, as it happens, a drop short. In other words, one gun will fire a shell that doesn't go the required distance, and boom, it'll drop short. And it makes you, well, there'll be screams and yells then. Now, when that barrage comes down on the post, the machine gun post, whatever it is, or their trenches, you'll put your head down. Because the shells are landing, you put your head down. Once the barrage lifts to move on, you've got to be close. In 2 minutes, they're up ready waiting for you, unless they're dazed. And so it's, well, we're lucky. The first post was taken when we went through. And then it was the first two companies, we were coming on behind, the first two companies had struck it hand to hand. After that, it wasn't much hand to hand, it was all across 100 yards or more. But the first post, there were dead Germans and dead Australians lying around and everything else. If they didn't put their hands up quick, if the hands went up quick, or if there was the slightest bit of movement, like taking prisoners back or anything, well, you couldn't afford, so you had to go on, because there were blokes coming on behind. And but if there was surrender, if a bloke put his hands up, no, I've never seen anyone shot like that. Bloke put his hands up, that was all right, but he wouldn't want to make a move. Well, not in the heat of battle. No. No, it's there's stories about prisoners being taken back and things. I didn't encounter it. Well, I never took any prisoners back. We just kept moving on. When we moved up to Libya, the Italian settlers, the original, they were very friendly. very friendly. The Arabs disappeared pretty well everywhere. They were, you wouldn't want to close your eyes while the Arabs were around. They were pretty good at looting, and we didn't see much of them. Uh, in Palestine when we first got there, you couldn't. We used to bolt or shackle our rifles to the tent pole, and you'd have to take the bolt out because if you slept with your rifle alongside you, it disappeared during the night. They'd they'd actually come into your tent and steal it from alongside you under your blanket, and you wouldn't know. They were good shufti men. Holy mackerel! Oh, because the bloke could be court-martialed if he lost his rifle, but so even with them bolted to a tent pole, they'd disappear. So they were good. They were good. In Cairo, Alexandria, uh, we 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 got on well. I suppose most troops would if they had money to spend. But no, I think we got on pretty well. But we never got to understand the culture and what made the things tick there. I remember the Christmas Day we were at Port Said. I went to church. Well, I must have known, but three of us decided to go to church on Christmas morning. First Christmas away from home, bit of nostalgia, and so we were in Port Said. We went to the local Anglican church, and just Bill Smith, Chris Moon, and myself. And after the service, how the minister stands outside and shakes the hand, and how are you? Pleased to see you at church, and we're wondering what we're going to do. And he said, will you hang on a minute? So we hang on a minute. You might want to talk to us about Australia or something. We're wondering we'll go down and see if we can get some bacon and eggs or something at a cafe with a gully man and all the rest of it. And he comes and said, look, what are you doing for Christmas dinner? We said, we're going downtown and see if we can get some steak and eggs, bacon and eggs or something. He said, just hang on a minute, will you? So he came back and said, look, I forget his name now, Mr. So-and-so. He said, look, if you don't mind sitting at another table because they've got a full Christmas dinner, you'd like to have Christmas dinner. Well, we like to have Christmas dinner. So we went, he was the chairman or executive president of the Port Suez shipping canal area, the whole, and we had a magnificent place. And it was in town, two-storey apartment, and he had the Sudanese black servants and everything. It was real Christmas, English Christmas, very pucker. So here were three NCOs, and we sat. They had another table set up for us just alongside theirs, and we had the works. Best Christmas dinner I've ever had, being served with these lovely servants and the grog. So while we're waiting for coffee, we'd like to stroll out on the veranda. So we strolled out on the veranda, and clippity-clop along the street in a Gary, there were three of our officers. Well, they were going for their Christmas Gary ride. Gary is a horse-drawn, like a cab thing. And we're on the veranda yelling out, hey! Now look, here we are with our pots and the coffee and these black servants around us. They go, I couldn't get over it. Wonderful Christmas. Best Christmas I had in the army.
Did you have a bit of a explaining to do when you got back?
If you blokes were good and went to church like that, like good Christians, you would have been all right too. So Christianity paid off, particularly if you're an Anglican. No, we had no thought of. But that was one Christmas. The last Christmas I had in the army was in was the absolute opposite. We're in New Guinea. We just come out of Javanning and we were chasing the Japanese up the coast. They were in retreat, and we were stuck on the cliff. There was not a drop of grog within 1,000 miles. I think we're on Bully. There was some talk of a bottle of beer per man, which we never saw. We were waiting for the Comfort Fund parcel. We sat there, and it was a and we were browned off with the war, because this is 1940, 44, 43. Yeah, I was getting mixed up in time. Oh, it was a shock, because now they said we're all talking bloody Christmas. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't long after that I went down to the officers' school, but this is before I went. Miserable. And what had happened, while we were chasing, sorry to get into New Guinea, but I'm talking about Christmas, while we were chasing the Japs up the coast, one half of the battalion had to go inland, which meant they had to go up and down the mountains to keep up with the ones on the, and we're the ones up the mountain, and we were browned off. Lae was an unopposed landing. We landed. It was tough going. We through the jungle. Eventually we got to Lae, and the 7th Division got there about the same time. But most of the Japs had escaped. We didn't know this at the time. And after we settled down there, we didn't know, but the Japs at the time escaped up to Finschhafen, the Finschhafen area, and our next action was to be a landing at Finschhafen. So we reassembled and in our landing ship infantry destroyers, and off we set for Finschhafen. Well, after landing at Lae, we thought this would be a nice exercise. You rush off, the ramps go down, you rush off into a couple of feet of water and charge up, and no enemy, so we weren't terribly worried. And the boffins, the intelligence people and everything else, had decided that Finschhafen, there were very few troops there anyway, and there'd be a walkover. Apparently from land headquarters, MacArthur directed that only one brigade would be assigned to the course. Well, later that was found to be totally inadequate. So we landed at Finschhafen. Well, we moved up the coast and landed at Finschhafen in the dark, or on the beach, and much to our horror and surprise, it was an opposed landing. It was the first opposed landing since Gallipoli. I'll never forget it. We came rushing. We were in a landing craft infantry, and I heard this noise along the side of the boat. I was leading my mob off on one side, and it was straight from the shore, straight into it was machine gun fire. Well, this wasn't what's supposed to happen. So as we charged in with our Americans who were landing us, they let their ramps down, so come on boys, off we charged. I got off, and the next bloke, Darryl Luck, hopped off. I think the next 3 or 4 blokes all got bullets because they'd adjusted their sights from too low, and they got us as we were coming off. And the casualties were on both sides were pretty heavy. We'd been landed on the wrong spot at the wrong time in the wrong place. So uh, we eventually, I personally thought I was going to drown. I had my foot caught in a rock. The water was over my head. Eventually, I forced myself out and got it, and the water was churning up with bullets, and the blokes were being hit. We had to get ashore. So I got ashore. Instead of a shelving beach, what the aerial photographs hadn't shown was it was a steep cliff, only about 30 or 40 feet in from the bush. And this is where the Japs were, and they had machine gun posts right along. Well, by the time we pulled our wounded out from the beach, we had to do something, so we started crawling up the rocks and throwing grenades and all the rest. It was pitch dark. Then the Americans decided they'd get into the action, so we're caught halfway between. There were the Americans with their guns in the front of their ships shooting, and the Japs shooting down, and we're in the middle. Well, we just scratching the better part of valor, so we ducked down behind the rocks. And the time the Yanks had stopped, the Japs had stopped, and they'd nicked off. Thank God. We'd tossed a few grenades and fired a few shots, but I think their plan was to halt the landing. So there we were stuck on the beach with the 2 battalions that landed were all mixed up. We'd been all, the landing barges had landed, had veered off to the wrong spots, and it was a complete shemozzle. Well, thank God we were pretty well trained. So there's only one thing to do as far as I'm concerned, is to get my blokes off the beach and up on the cliff and wait for dawn, and then we'd sort it out. So I got a couple of blokes, they still rib me to this day. I said, up the cliff, boys. Keep an eye out while we get organised here. Well, these 2 fellas laughed. One was a reinforcement who'd never seen action from the Middle East, and the other one was a good old soldier, Darryl Luck. And Darryl looked at me. I said, come on. Up they went, and they kept a lookout while we got organised. Eventually got up at the top, and as soon as dawn came, we pushed inland. Well, we pushed inland a couple of 100 yards, and we waited for the battalion to get organised because we're all isolated. And while we're there waiting for orders and instructions of what to do, we could have this delicious smell coming up. The blokes were all sniffing. What had happened, the Yanks had landed their troops on the beach, their shore battalion, and they'd set up their kitchens, and they were doing flapjacks and bacon and eggs. So the blokes said, oh, look, I said, well, only half at a time. So the blokes went back, and they're the greatest feat of their lives. And our bully and biscuit didn't look too good. So they came back, licking their chops. So the rest down. There's no doubt about them. They had terrific meals. And then we said, okay, we got reorganised and pushed in, and we went through the various actions to capture Finschhafen. It was tough going. We didn't realise there were a lot more troops there than was anticipated. And there was a high dominating point called, there was between Saddleberg. And Saddleberg was a high mountain, and between Finschhafen, the town, and the plains, there was a place called Javenvenang, which is halfway between up the mountain. So we decided that we'd have to hold Javenvenang while I just cleared the area. no one expected at this stage. Well, of course, the Japs had reinforced. Instead of a few hundred, they had thousands there. Well, eventually after various actions, other battalions cleared the area. We were sent to Javening. Well, we'd no sooner got there than we were cut off. When I say we were cut off, we were surrounded, but there was a path out which enabled us with the native carriers to get through and bring us supplies, and the walking wounded and things were able to get out. But I suppose it's fair to say we were cut, because of the area, we were cut off on 3 to 4 sides, but you could get through an area to get relief. Well, we were there for 3 weeks, and it was under pressure the whole time. There was one watering spot which was used by both the Nips and ourselves. So when we went to get water, we were very, very careful. And I suppose you could say both sides could have put up ambushes, but we didn't. I think we both needed water. But anyway, it was tough going. Our little position, we were on a corner of a track. We were attacked by the Nips. I was sitting in a hole with one of the blokes, Derek Cunningham, and we had a few casualties. And suddenly he grasped, there's the 2 of us in this 2-man hole, grabbed his shoulder and said, "God, I've got it." What the hell? I couldn't see any blood. So I said to him, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I've been hit." I said, "Rubbish." He said, "Look." And he pointed to the bottom of the hole, and there was an unexploded rifle grenade from the Nips, which hadn't got off. He said, "What'll I do?" I said, "Throw the bloody thing out." So he threw it out. And just as well he didn't jump up and go out, because the Nips were right round us. They were just firing at us from about 30, 40 yards. He and a few others wounded went round to the RAP, that's the regimental aid post, and they were sent out. Well, they went down the track, and as soon as they'd gone, the track was cut, so we were short-staffed again. But we were there for 3 weeks, and it was rough. It was tough. We were in close proximity, 30 or 40 yards. They mounted attack after attack on various companies and platoons. But we just stuck it out. Eventually, there was going to be a major attack on Saddleburg, which there were thousands of troops concentrated, and they brought in tanks. Well, the tanks, and we still had these Japs around us, and the orders were we had to clear them out. Well, so the tanks couldn't be heard, because they didn't want them to assist us. We're a smaller operation. Now, one of the tanks threw up on the big mountain, and as a surprise, they came up under noise cover of artillery, so we had to clear. This was a sheer infantry attack on the Nips round our positions, which were only 20, 30 yards away. Well, that battle went on for about 12 hours. It was just feet at a time. Anyway, eventually they broke and went, and that was the finish of us up there, and we went down to the plantation for rest, and that's when I got my Dear John letter saying, it's all off, which was a great relief, actually. We all laughed about it. Then we did the advance up to CO and chased the Nips up there. Then I was sent down to an officers' training school. But on the way down, I had a bad dose of malaria. I got to Moresby to get one of these Liberty ships, and I was really crook. But luckily, my brother, my young brother Jim, was in Moresby, and I don't know how he heard, but or whether I got in touch with him, but anyway, he took me under his wing, filled me up with whiskey, and they actually virtually carried me onto the ship. I said, just get me back to Australia. I don't care, get me back to Australia. Well, I don't know how long the ship took, but they had an ambulance waiting when I got there to the Townsville and into the OGH, and I was there for a few weeks. That was positioned just opposite Magnetic Island. And eventually, I was discharged from hospital, and I went by the officers' training school was just out of a place called Woodside, just outside Adelaide. So we went by train. Well, a train took about 4 or 5 days in those days. So I hopped off in Sydney to go and see my parents and my family. Finally, I knocked on the door, and my mother answered the door, and she said, "Hello." I said, "Hello." She said, "You got news of Bob?" I said, "I'm Bob." She didn't recognise me. I was, yellow and a bit thin. Anyway, she got over that. And then I went off to October. I was there for about 3 weeks, and I got malaria again. So then I went down to a convalescent place in Semaphore, and had a good time there. And instead of going back, I didn't take back. I had to go back to the unit because I got there, and when I got back, the sports meeting was on. And I used to do a bit of running and jumping. The brigadier said to me, Brigadier Winder, "What the hell are you doing back here, Ray?" I told him. He said, "Oh God," he said, "I didn't think you'd get failed." I said, "No, we've got to get you back again." So anyway, I went after, but I was there up in the Tablelands for some time. Eventually there was another intake, and I went back to the officers' training school. By this time it had been transferred to Seymour, and after 4 months of, well, it wasn't unnecessary training, but I think we'd been through most of it. Eventually graduated and had leave, and we ended up, we reinforcement officers, I had some good mates amongst them. We ended up at Canangro, which is it was a well-known, infamous training school. Everyone said it was bastardry, and well, as I said earlier, I was lucky. The commander of the wing I was in was my ex-company commander. The 2IC was an ex-platoon commander, and 3 or 4 of the training NCOs were from the battalion. Well, instead of all the, I was able to relax and enjoy life in the camp while everyone else was out charging around the countryside. God, they'd get you up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you'd have to run a mile to have a shave down at some billabong or something, which wasn't my cup of tea, not at this stage. And because all these, and at that stage too, a lot of units had been disbanded, like anti-aircraft, and they were trying to place these officers, and they were training them in younger warfare. Well, you can imagine what it'd be like as a captain or a major, even a lieutenant, going to a battle-hardened battalion, just come out of a unit that wasn't a front-line unit, and been to a training school and having to take over troops who've been in the war for 4 or 5 years. But anyway, I missed all that. Eventually, I got my marching orders. I was to go to the 2nd 3rd Battalion, which were back in New Guinea. Meantime, my old battalion had gone off to Borneo. Well, we arrived, we were off, we go to the 2nd, 3rd Battalion. I was posted as a lieutenant. They were up at ITB Wee. So we arrived in Moresby at the staging camp, and it was pretty crude, pretty rough. The officers were, well, I think they seated up officers, and the blokes there were treated them like ORs, not that mattered. But there again, luck was my way. I was there having breakfast, and I heard a bloke singing out, Bob Ray. I looked round. I hadn't seen him since, I don't think he even stayed with us, but in the early 1940s, he was in the same platoon as me, Ted Macy, and we were at Bathurst together, and he'd introduced us to people. He recognised me. Thank God I remembered his name, Ted Macy. Come out of this, he said, come out of this, come and be. So I was treated out in the kitchen with bacon and eggs, you name it. He said, well, you'll be here for a couple of days. Better have a bit of a meet the boys this afternoon. I said, yeah. So we'll have a grog or two. Grog? He said, don't worry, we're in the business up here. That's our business. Apart from looking after the transit officers, we're in the business of doing a bit of jungle juice and trading with the eggs and the rest of it, making a fortune. So that afternoon, I think the flavoured jungle juices they were selling for $8 or $10 a bottle. Scotch was, when I say $10, £10, £8 or £10, and the Yanks would pay anything for it. And I think whiskey, even the old COR was bringing £10 a bottle. So I sat down and drank for the afternoon. Didn't cost me a penny. I reckon I drank $100 worth of grog. But that unfortunately lasted a couple of days. And off to ITB Wee. And the pilot of the plane that took us up was a brother of Bill Brown, the cricketer. And I think he had some ice cream for his brother or something. Anyway, we landed at Wee and up to ITB. And I got a bit the same reception as I suppose most reinforcement officers. I was plonked in a tent on my own and said, well, I'll see you eventually. And I wasn't terribly happy because I reckon I'd seen as much of the war as any of them. Eventually I saw the CA. It was a terrific bloke actually, Ian Hutchison, Colonel Hutchison. And he said, oh God, we've got another burnt out sergeant as a reinforcement officer. I said, well, you're probably right, but I hope I've got a bit left. So I was given 13 platoon, and the blokes tested me out, but you know, we had to go on a patrol, and there was the usual. I knew I would have it because I'd done it to other reinforcements. You know, the nips are there. I said, oh, good, you know, keep going, off we go. But anyway, so they soon accepted me, and the day before the first atom bomb was dropped, the company commander must have been getting a bit jack of the inactivity, so I was hauled up to take a fighting patrol out. That was the day after it had been dropped, that's right. So you didn't have to be blind Freddy to know the war was going to be over soon. He wanted action, so I took this fighting patrol out, and it was very armed, and off we went looking to knock the nips off. Well, I think for the first and only time in my army career, I wasn't quite honest. I went halfway, making certain we didn't find any nips, and the blokes were 100% behind me. I think I didn't talk to them. I did a circle and back up the track, and came back. No enemy sighted. Searched them out. No enemy sighted. No. I don't think he was too happy because the nips weren't that far away, but I was happy. Anyway, the next night we're waiting for news. Bang, off goes the second one. Oh, was it Nagasaki, the first one? The second one. Hiroshima, I think, was first. Well, I must admit there was cheering in the hills at Ida B. Wee-Wag. I mean, I'm sorry, but no one felt sorry for any of the poor blighters who were copping it. I think it was only within 24 hours the Japs surrendered, and word went out from their commanders to come in. Well, I was under the 5 and 2 plan, which meant blokes that had 5 years service and 2 years overseas, they were to be released. So just as the nips were coming in, I was sent down to the coast with other 5 and 2s, and we built a couple of staging huts for them as the nips were coming in. So we got, I think, on the Katoomba and back to Brisbane. The funny part about it, you talk about coincidence during the war, but as we got off the boat onto trucks and we're driving through Brisbane, and the convoy, the truck convoy pulled up the traffic, and I heard this boy Jim, Bob, it was Jim, my brother. He was out there with 2 bears. How he knew we were coming through, I don't know. And how he knew we'd stop there. So Bog, I had a bear, and he hopped on the truck to go. I said, look, I'll meet you here tonight, and we'll go to the officers' club. He said, I'm not an officer. I said, no, you're not, but you will be tonight. So I met him, and I'd spare pips, of course, which I put on his shoulders. And we go to the Hotel Daniel, which was the officers' club. Well, that was crowded because war was finishing, and I know there was a colonel, a brigadier, something. Got Jim, and he started to say to Jim, I don't know about that bloke, that's me. I'm here under false pretenses. Jim would say, oh, I think he's all right. Jim said, what unit are you from? He said, oh, the bath and the hot bath and something unit. Oh, anyway, we had a ball.